There is a video. 60 seconds, maybe less. Two people standing side by side, wearing daffodils on their lapels, speaking a language most of the world does not understand. No big announcement. No grand occasion. Just a quiet message for the people of Wales on the first day of March, 2026. And, yet the moment it went live on Instagram, something strange happened. People stopped scrolling. They watched it twice. Then, they started asking questions, not about what was said, but about where it was filmed. That question, where were they, turned out to be far more interesting than anyone expected. Because here is what the world assumed when William and Catherine released their St. David's Day message in March 2026, the couple had just moved into their new home, Forest Lodge, only 4 months earlier. They had relocated there in November 2025, settling into what they and everyone around them had started calling their forever home. It sat on the Windsor estate, grand and private, 8 bedrooms, a tennis court, a pond, a small lake, a paddock. Everything a future king and his family could possibly need, tucked away behind enough trees and enough security to make the outside world feel very far away indeed. So when the video appeared, warm background, elegant setting, that particular kind of soft English country house light, the natural assumption ran through every royal watcher, every tabloid editor, every curious person on social media like a single shared thought, asterisk they filmed it at home. Inside Forest Lodge. We're finally getting a look inside, asterisk the speculation started within minutes of the video going live. People zoomed in on the background. They looked at the curtains. They studied the furniture. They compared screenshots to old photographs. Forums filled up. Comment sections overflowed. They were wrong. Every single one of them. The video was not filmed at Forest Lodge. It was filmed at Frogmore House, a completely different property, sitting roughly half a mile south of Windsor Castle on the Windsor Home Park estate. Not the family's new home. Not even a home at all, in the modern sense. Frogmore House is something older and more complicated than that. It is a Grade I listed, 17th century English country house owned by the Crown Estate, used for royal entertaining and official purposes, steeped in 3 centuries of royal history, and, crucially, entirely separate from the private lives of the Wales family. That distinction, between Frogmore House and Forest Lodge, between a working backdrop and a private home, is not just a matter of geography. It is a deliberate, carefully considered, quietly powerful message. And, to understand why William and Catherine made that choice, you have to start at the beginning, not of their marriage, not even of their move to Forest Lodge, but at the beginning of Frogmore House itself. The name comes from the frogs. Queen Victoria noted them personally, on a summer morning in 1875, describing what she found as an immense number of little frogs, and found them, she recorded, quite disgusting. But, the house predates even Victoria. It was built between 1680 and 1684, the work of Hugh May, architect to Charles II, originally constructed for tenants on the Windsor estate. It sat there quietly through the reigns of several monarchs, leased to various families, until 1792, when George III bought it for his wife, Queen Charlotte. She needed a country retreat. A place away from court life. Somewhere to paint, to read, to botanize, to breathe. She had the architect James Wyatt modernize and enlarge it, and, in the years that followed, Frogmore became the place where royal women came to be themselves rather than to perform. That pattern, Frogmore as refuge, as backdrop, as a place used by royals but never entirely claimed as home, continued for centuries. Queen Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, lived there until her death in 1861. Victoria herself visited often, writing of the estate, all is peace and quiet and you only hear the hum of the bees, the singing of the birds. Princess Helena, Victoria's third daughter, lived there with her husband. The house shifted hands and purposes with each generation, largely unoccupied as a permanent residence since the 1870s, used for entertaining, for family gatherings, for the kind of quiet royal business that doesn't make headlines. In the 21st century, Frogmore's grounds became famous for a different reason entirely. Just down the path from Frogmore House stands Frogmore Cottage, a smaller, simpler building that Queen Charlotte had constructed in 1801 and that, in 2019, was renovated at considerable public expense for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The name became shorthand for royal drama, the renovation controversy, the stepping back from royal duties, the eviction notice in 2023, the ongoing speculation about Prince Andrew and where he might live after being pushed out of Royal Lodge. Frogmore Cottage and all it represented: scandal, rupture, the family fault lines that never fully healed, sat just yards from where William and Catherine stood to record their gentle Welsh greeting. That proximity is not accidental. Or rather, the choice to use Frogmore House as the filming location was not made carelessly, given everything that surrounds the name. But that is a story that belongs in what comes next. What matters first is understanding what Forest Lodge actually is, and why, 4 months after moving in, William and Catherine had made a firm and clear decision that their new home would not appear in any public-facing content. Not a peek. Not a glimpse of a doorframe or a window or a fireplace. Nothing. Forest Lodge, formerly known as Holly Grove, is an 8-bedroom Georgian mansion nestled on the corner of Windsor Great Park. It has 6 separate chimneys, 8 bay windows, a ballroom, a private tennis court, its own pool, a pond, and grounds that include a paddock and what was once a garden designed by the landscape artist Humphrey Repton. It was valued at over £20 million by modern estimates. The late Queen Elizabeth II loved it. It was one of the properties used to host President Donald Trump and the First Lady during a state visit. It is, by any measure, a significant house. William and Catherine chose it for reasons that had nothing to do with grandeur and everything to do with practicality and peace. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, attend school nearby. The move from their previous home at Adelaide Cottage, which they'd lived in since 2022, was timed deliberately around school holidays to cause minimum disruption. They paid for the renovations themselves. They paid market rent. No public funds. No fanfare. A Kensington Palace spokesperson confirmed the move in August 2025, and, by November it was done, the family of 5 quietly settled, the boxes unpacked, the new chapter begun. And then, almost immediately, the decision was made. Forest Lodge would be private. Completely, deliberately, non-negotiably private. This was not unusual by royal standards. William in particular had spent years building protective walls around his family's domestic life. But the Forest Lodge decision had a specific texture to it, a firmness that went beyond standard royal caution. Because in November 2025, as the Wales family was moving into their new home and, carefully, quietly drawing the curtain on its interior, the world around them was anything but quiet. The ongoing drama involving Prince Andrew, William's uncle, King Charles's younger brother, was reaching new levels of public turbulence. Andrew had refused to leave Royal Lodge despite pressure from the palace. His connection to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal had not faded from public consciousness. If anything, newly released documents were keeping it alive and expanding it. The royal family's reputation, its careful public image, the narrative of service and dignity that Charles and William had both invested so much in maintaining, all of it was under strain. William was navigating his role as future king against a backdrop of ongoing, grinding institutional crisis. Every public decision he made carried extra weight. Every choice about image and access and what the public was permitted to see was being made inside that pressure. So when St. David's Day came around on the 1st of March, 2026, and it was time for the Prince and Princess of Wales to record their annual message of goodwill to the people of Wales, the location was not chosen casually. It was chosen with intention. And the intention was precise: warmth without exposure. Duty without domesticity. A window open to the world, but the home kept firmly behind a closed door. They went to Frogmore House. They stood in its elegant rooms with their daffodil pins and their carefully rehearsed Welsh phrases. They filmed the video. And then, they went home to the house that no camera was invited to see. What no one watching knew, in that moment, was quite how much history they were standing inside. The video started with William. He looked directly at the camera, daffodil pinned to his lapel, and began to speak. Not in English. Not in the polished received pronunciation that the world expected from a man who would one day be king. He spoke in Welsh Cymraeg, one of the oldest living languages in Europe, a language with its own sounds and its own music that most people alive today have never heard spoken at length, let alone by British royalty. He said that Wales was a beautiful country with a rich history and wonderful people. He said it in Welsh. Then, Catherine spoke. That was the moment. That was the thing that made people pause their scrolling and watch the clip again. Because Catherine, Princess of Wales, had never in her public life spoken a word of Welsh. Not once. Not in 14 years of royal duties, not in countless visits to Wales, not in any of the dozens of St. David's Day messages the couple had released over the years. She had stood at William's side through all of it, smiling, engaged, present, but the Welsh language had remained his territory. A thing he had been slowly, privately working at, learning conversational phrases over years of effort, finally, delivering a full Welsh message for the first time the previous year. Now she joined him. Her pronunciation was careful. You could hear the effort in it, not a stumble, not a mistake, but the particular sound of someone who has practiced something enough times that the words come out right while still carrying the faint weight of everything it took to get there. She said Wales was very close to their hearts. She said she looked forward to every visit. She wished everyone a day full of celebration with family and friends. She said it all in Welsh. The internet, predictably, had a great deal to say. Some people were moved. Some were impressed. One comment, like thousands of times, simply said, "The princess actually sounds Welsh." Another viewer wrote that Welsh was a tough but beautiful language and that Catherine had done it beautifully. A former royal protection officer from Wales, a man who had spent his career close to the royal family, said he was full of admiration. There was, for a day at least, a warmth in the response that felt genuine rather than performed, the particular warmth that comes when someone does something unexpected and difficult in public, and does it with grace. But here is what most people watching the video on their phones never thought about. The room they were standing in had seen more royal history than almost any other space in England. Frogmore House, where the video was filmed, has been a royal residence in one form or another since 1792, over 200 years of British monarchs and their families passing through its rooms. Queen Charlotte, wife of George III, used it as her country retreat. After her death in 1818, it passed to her eldest unmarried daughter, Princess Augusta. When Augusta died in 1840, Queen Victoria gave it to her own mother, the Duchess of Kent, who lived there until 1861. Victoria visited regularly and wrote of the estate with the particular tenderness she reserved for the places where she felt most herself. The house was quiet there. Peaceful. The kind of place where a queen could breathe. After the Duchess of Kent died, Frogmore passed through more hands, more purposes, more generations of royals, finding in it a space between the public demands of palace life and the private life they were trying to protect. Princess Helena lived there with her husband. The house was used for family gatherings and private entertaining. Queen Mary, wife of George V, took a special interest in it, furnishing it with family mementos, cataloging its contents with the obsessive care of someone who understood that history is stored in objects. She described Frogmore once as a family souvenir museum as well as a museum of bygones and of interesting odds and ends. It is a description that still feels exactly right. In the gardens of the Frogmore estate, those 33 acres of landscaped grounds that Queen Charlotte herself had shaped, that the Reverend Christopher Alderson had redesigned in the picturesque style in the 1790s, with winding lakes and wooded mounds and paths and bridges, stands the Royal Mausoleum. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert are buried there. So are the Duke of Windsor, formerly Edward VIII, the king who abdicated for love, and the Duchess of Windsor. So are Princess Helena, Princess Victoria, and others whose names have faded from the public memory but whose lives shaped the institution William and Catherine now represent. This is not background scenery. It is not a neutral backdrop chosen for its good light and its tasteful furnishings. When William and Catherine stand in Frogmore House to record a message, they are standing inside a building that has held royal women seeking refuge from court life for centuries, a building that exists on grounds where British monarchs are buried, a building whose very name became famous in the 21st century because of everything that went wrong in the family, the Harry and Meghan departure, the Frogmore Cottage renovation scandal, the public rupture that was still, in 2026, nowhere near fully healed. The choice to use that specific location for that specific video is the kind of thing royal aides think about in detail. It sends signals that the people reading them understand, even if the general public watching from their sofas does not. And what Frogmore House signals, in contrast to the cozy domesticity of Forest Lodge, in contrast to the kitchen table intimacy that other public figures sometimes perform for cameras, is this: this is official. This is duty. This is the work. The house behind the video is not where they live. It is where they serve. William had used Frogmore House as a filming backdrop before. The previous year, he had recorded a message in Welsh marking St. David's Day from what observers and royal correspondents confirmed was the same location. He had used it for a message to the Steve Irwin Gala in May 2024. He had used it for the BAFTA Television Awards. He had used it for the Earthshot Prize Innovation Summit in 2022. There was a consistency to it, the same elegant space, the same formal atmosphere, the same signal that this was a professional setting rather than a domestic one. Some public figures, when they film from their homes, do it to create intimacy. They want the audience to feel close. They want the glimpse of the bookshelf, the fireplace, the child's drawing on the fridge. It is a calculated openness. Here is my life, here is who I am when the cameras are not supposed to be watching. Harry and Meghan did exactly this in their Montecito years, appearing regularly on the veranda of their Californian estate, the same backdrop becoming instantly recognizable, part of their personal brand. William and Catherine made the opposite choice. Not once, in the months since moving into Forest Lodge, had the interior of the house appeared in any official content. When Catherine let slip, in a meeting with the German First Lady, Elke Budenbender, that she was working on mood boards for the renovation, it was the closest the public had come to any knowledge of what the inside looked like. The renovations were still ongoing. The house was still becoming what they wanted it to be. But, more than that, they had decided, firmly and clearly, that Forest Lodge was for them. For the children. For the private life they had been fighting to protect for years. The decision was particularly meaningful for William. Of the two of them, he is the one for whom the stakes are highest. He will be king. Every decision he makes, every image he projects, every boundary he draws or fails to draw is part of the longer project of what his reign will look like. And, in the early months of 2026, with the Andrew situation grinding on, with the family's institutional reputation under sustained pressure, with the ongoing aftermath of all the years of rupture and drama, the last thing a future king needed was for his private home to become a topic of public speculation and media scrutiny. There is a line between the private person and the public role. Between the father who helps with homework and the prince who records St. David's Day messages. Between the house where the children sleep and the elegant rooms where the duty is performed. William had been drawing that line his entire adult life, fighting for it, protecting it, watching it erode in the places he couldn't control. Forest Lodge was his chance to redraw it. To decide, in his own home, where the cameras stopped. And so they went to Frogmore. They stood in those old rooms with their centuries of royal weight, their history of women seeking refuge and queens seeking peace, their proximity to the graves of monarchs. They said their Welsh words carefully and warmly and, well. They wore their daffodils. And then, they went home to the house that no one was invited to see. What makes the choice so interesting is not just the strategy behind it. It is what it reveals about where William and Catherine are in their lives, and where Catherine, specifically, is in hers. Because the St. David's Day video was not just a location story. It was also, quietly and without fanfare, the latest chapter in one of the most watched recoveries in modern royal history. Catherine had been diagnosed with cancer in March 2024. She had completed preventative chemotherapy by September of that year. She announced her remission in January 2025. In the months that followed, she returned to public life carefully, gradually, with a deliberateness that felt less like a communication strategy and more like a woman genuinely finding her footing again. Her first public outing of 2026 had been a surprise visit to Charing Cross Hospital with William in January, where she spoke about moments of fear during treatment and credited creativity, nature, and family for helping her through. On World Cancer Day in February, she sent a message that said simply, "You are not alone." At the BAFTAs on the 22nd of February, her first attendance at the ceremony in 3 years, she rewore a two-tone Gucci gown in blush pink and mauve, standing beside William in his burgundy velvet suit, looking exactly like someone who had decided that being present was itself a kind of statement. Then came the visit to Wales on February 26, the week before St. David's Day. They went to Powys, a county that holds the distinction of having more volunteers per head of population than anywhere else in the United Kingdom, which is exactly the kind of thing that William and Catherine are drawn to. They visited the Hanging Gardens in Llanellows, a creative community space built around resilience. They went to Oriel Davies Art Gallery in Newtown. They finished at Half in Yerevan, a hub for culture, community, and heritage, where volunteer organizations had gathered to meet them. It rained, as it often rains in Wales in late February. They stood in it and smiled and greeted people and accepted flowers and talked to strangers with the ease of people who have been doing this for a long time and actually don't mind the rain. Someone in the crowd called out something warm and Welsh was spoken and there was laughter. A few days later, Catherine stood in Frogmore House and spoke Welsh on camera for the first time in her life. The two things are connected. They always are, with her. There is a question that sounds simple and turns out not to be. Why does it matter where they filmed it? 60 seconds of video. Two people with daffodils. A pleasant room with good light. Why should anyone care whether the background is Frogmore House or Forest Lodge or a rented studio in central London? They said their Welsh phrases. They meant them warmly. The message reached the people it was intended for. Why should the location carry any weight at all? The answer is that location, for a royal family, is never just geography. It is language. It is the part of the communication that happens underneath the words being spoken, in the visual grammar that experienced royal observers and palace insiders read as fluently as text. When Harry and Meghan filmed from their Montecito estate, the message was, "This is who we are now. This is our life. We are opening *" when the late Queen addressed the nation from Windsor Castle during the pandemic, the message was, *" we are still here. The institution holds * when Charles delivers Christmas messages from Sandringham, the message is continuity, tradition, the long thread connecting present to past. When William and Catherine stood in Frogmore House to record their St. David's Day message, and not in their newly beloved Forest Lodge, the message, quietly, precisely, deliberately, was, * our home is ours. What we show you is the work. Not the life *. That distinction matters more in March 2026 than it would have at almost any other moment in recent royal history. Because the Wales family is in the middle of something. Not a crisis, the word crisis no longer quite fits where they are, because they have come through the hardest part of it and are standing on the other side, still standing. But, a transition. A becoming. And, in that becoming, every choice about what to reveal and what to protect is load-bearing. Forest Lodge itself is still finding its shape. Catherine let slip about the mood boards. The renovations, slowed by the complexity of working on a Grade 2 listed Georgian property, were still ongoing when the St. David's Day video was filmed. The house was being made into a home, slowly, privately, personally. New flooring. Replacement windows. Attention to at least one of the 6 fireplaces. The choices that turn a historic property into a place where a family actually lives, where children leave their shoes in the wrong place and someone always forgets to close the door. Into that process, the cameras were not invited. And there is something almost radical about that, in 2026, when the performance of domesticity has become a central feature of how public figures build connection with their audiences. Other royals across Europe post kitchen photographs. Social media is full of celebrities showing the real version of their lives, the messy kitchen, the tired mornings, the children being children. It generates warmth. It generates engagement. It works. William and Catherine looked at all of that and made a different calculation. Their connection with the public would not be built on glimpses of their private life. It would be built on the work. On the visits to Welsh communities in the rain. On the careful, effortful Welsh phrases learned and practiced until they were good enough to say in public. On the choice to show up to Charing Cross Hospital and sit with people and talk about fear in a way that was real rather than performed. On 25 years of accumulated presence that had cost them both, in different ways, a great deal. That is the model they have chosen. Not intimacy through exposure, but intimacy through consistency. And Frogmore House, whatever its complicated history, serves that model well. It is elegant without being ostentatious. It is clearly official without feeling cold. It has that particular quality of English country house, light, soft, even, the kind that photographs well without trying. William had used it before, multiple times, for multiple occasions. The location was established. The signal was consistent. Here is the work. Here is the duty. Here is the face we show the world. But Frogmore is not a neutral choice, and whoever made the decision to use it in March 2026 understood that. The estate sits inside a landscape loaded with meaning. The royal mausoleum in the gardens holds Victoria and Albert, holds Edward VIII and the woman he gave up his crown for, holds generations of people who were once exactly what William is slowly becoming, heirs, and then kings, and then history. The grounds that Queen Charlotte shaped in the 1790s, the winding paths and lakes that have held centuries of royal private moments, are 2 minutes' walk from where the video was filmed. You cannot stand in Frogmore House without standing inside all of that, whether or not any of it is said aloud. And, then, there is the proximity to Frogmore Cottage. It would be obtuse to pretend that the name Frogmore carries no associations in 2026. The cottage, built in 1801, renovated at public expense in 2019, the center of ongoing controversy, connected in the public mind to the Sussex departure and everything that came with it, sits on the same estate. The Andrew drama, the Epstein file revelations, the question of who would live in Frogmore Cottage now that Harry and Meghan had vacated it, the palace's ongoing battle to move Andrew from Royal Lodge, all of it orbits the Frogmore estate in ways that had been making headlines for months. William chose to film there anyway. Or rather, the decision was made, by the careful people who make these decisions, that Frogmore House, not Frogmore Cottage, but the house itself, older and grander and historically distinct, was the right location. That the associations it carried were manageable, or perhaps even useful. That using it demonstrated a kind of calm authority, we are not avoiding this place. This place belongs to the institution, and we are the institution, and we are not afraid of what surrounds it, that is a very specific kind of message to send. It is the message of people who have decided that what they are building, a stable, serious, private at home and present in public royal life, is stronger than whatever noise surrounds it. The noise, in early 2026, was significant. The Andrew situation was not resolved. The family fault lines that had been opened by the Sussex years were not fully healed, even if they were no longer bleeding as visibly. The media remained hungry for every detail about Forest Lodge, about what the interior looked like, about whether the renovations were done, about whether Catherine's health was truly stable, about whether William's carefully maintained public stoicism was real or performed. Against all of that noise, William and Catherine made a 60-second video in Welsh, in a house they did not live in, and said that Wales was very close to their hearts. And the public, by and large, loved it. The reaction to the St. David's Day video was warm in a way that cut through the usual royal commentary divisions. The people who follow every royal move closely loved Catherine's Welsh pronunciation. The people in Wales who heard it felt genuinely seen, not patronized, not performed at, but spoken to, in their language, by a couple who had shown up the week before in the rain and stayed as long as they were needed. The former Royal Protection Officer from Wales, when he gave his verdict, was full of admiration. The comment sections, for once, were largely kind. Some of that warmth was about the Welsh. The effort it takes to learn a language, the particular vulnerability of speaking it in public for the first time, these things read as genuine because they are genuine. Catherine had not been able to deliver a Welsh message in the years before 2024 for reasons that had nothing to do with language lessons and everything to do with keeping herself alive. The fact that she stood there in March 2026 and spoke it well is not a PR achievement. It is, in a quieter and more human way, a measure of how far she has come. And yet the location still tells its own story, separate from the language and the daffodils and the warmth of the public response. The location says, "This is not your home. You are seeing what we choose to show you, and we are choosing with care." The house behind these words has been used by queens who needed refuge from court life and by a family that needed a backdrop for duty. We are using it the same way, to perform the public work in a space that is not our private space, because our private space belongs to us and to our children and to the part of our life that the cameras do not reach. It is a drawing of a line. Quiet, elegant, filmed in good light, spoken in Welsh. But, a line nonetheless. Forest Lodge sits a few minutes away, on the other side of the Windsor estate, with its 8 bedrooms and its tennis court and its ongoing renovations and its mood boards and its school-run mornings and its ordinary extraordinary family life. The children there. William and Catherine there. The house becoming home, slowly and privately, in the way that the best homes always do, room by room, choice by choice, year by year. No cameras. Just life. That is the true story of where the St. David's Day video was filmed, and why. It is not a scandal. It is not even, by most measures, a surprise. It is a glimpse, sideways, of who William and Catherine have decided to be in this chapter of their lives. People who work in public and live in private. People who will speak a difficult language in front of the world and, then, go home to a house the world is not invited into. People who have learned, the hard way, that some things are worth protecting. And they are protecting them.